Control now.
Thank you. Okay, it is time to start our session. Welcome to Netmod in Philadelphia and online. I am Lou Berger. We have with me Kent Watson and Joel Jegley, my co-chairs. They are both online, and Kent will be the one coordinating the slides and handing it to the different presenters. So I think this will all work well. It's the IETF. So we have our usual note well. The short of this is anything you say here becomes part of our permanent record and is considered a contribution. If you're unfamiliar with the note well, please take a look at the main IETF page and follow the links to familiarize yourself with that. We also remind everyone that we do have a code of conduct which says please treat each other professionally and with respect. For this meeting, we are using the integrated Meet Echo queue management. Everyone should take a look at the QR code that's up on the screen or go find it off of the main agenda page. And we're going to try to use that to manage the queue. That'll be particularly helpful because my co-chairs are remote and we'll all try to watch the queue. But having that integrated queue will make it easy on us. We've also been asked to remind participants that masks are required in session and keep them on. The mics seem to work just fine with the mask on. Remote participants, if you're hearing me, you've already figured this out. You're on Meet Echo. I'll point everyone out also to there's the note taking, the joint note. Oops. We have joint note taking. The link is here. It's also, there's a very nice way of getting it from Meet Echo. You just go sort of off to the right in the upper right, and it says meeting note taking. And if you can click on that, you'll join us at this page. It's really helpful to help capture the comments that are made during discussion. You do not need to capture the presented material. It is great if you capture someone else's, and it's even better if you go make sure that your name is captured correctly in the minutes and that your comment was accurately represented. All material has been uploaded. We have one late addition from our AD that we'll try to get uploaded before he talks at the end of the session. We're going to spend much of our time today talking about Yang versioning. This is a topic that I'm sure most of you are really familiar with. It's been going on for a bit. We have done a last call on the first two documents, and we had talked about holding the documents up until the full document set of 5 documents was ready for last call. In discussion with the authors and the AD, we're going to actually do something a little different. Basically, the consensus among those working on the document is it's not close to ready, and they need a bit of time. And rather than hold up these other documents for a long time, which we thought originally it was going to be a short time, but now it's a long time, we're going to wait for an update that you're going to hear about today. We're going to discuss that, resolve any of the issues that are open, get out a new version, do another last call, and then progress those. At least that's the plan right now. That is different than what we talked about previously. Okay, so that's going to be the majority of our discussion today. And then we still have some time available, and we're going to talk about a couple of unchartered documents. And we had 25 minutes left on the schedule. So in thinking about what we might do with that time to make good use of us all being together, we have 2 topics. The first topic is going to be Yang Next, which we've talked about a few times. And then we're going to have an informal discussion led by the chairs. And then the other topic is our ID presented some ideas on how to move faster to the IESG, and we're going to talk about that as well. And I think we have 25 minutes for those conversations. We have one recently published RFC. Thank you to everyone who worked on it. We're here to publish documents. It's always great to see everyone and meet and talk, but our product are the documents. So thank you for all who made that happen. We have a couple of documents, or a few documents, that are post last call. I don't know what that was. Rob, are you getting ready to go to the mic?
So Rob Wilton, so just wanted to speak to the two documents that the interface extensions and sub-interface feeder model that I've been sat on for a long time. So I'm glad to say that Scott and Don have kindly agreed or offered to help me progress those forward. So I've sent an email on the first one to them today. I've had a quick chat with them this week, but the aim is to try and get an updated version of the first one out quite quickly. I don't think there's that much to resolve, and then we'll resolve the issues in the other one and hopefully get these finally done soon. So I think when I discussed it with you, and a second working group last call would be appreciated on those updates.
That'd be great. As soon as you're ready, please make sure to send something to the chair saying we're ready. We'll push go and get these documents done. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Yeah, really appreciate getting them out while balancing your added load. I know it's quite a bit being AD. The next document is the BIS on 6991. That one is last call, and we should expect a write-up soon from the Shepherd. So nothing really interesting there. And then we have the two documents that we talked about already, that those were the post last call that we have the new plan for. Syslog was returned to us a little while ago. It needs a minor change, and that's going to be talked about, I believe, next. Just before the meeting, we received a liaison from ORAN, and this is unusual that they're actually asking for a response. Usually we get liaisons and they just want information. They just are informing us of an activity. And this one, they've said, we really want these documents to be published, the ones we just talked about, and can you let us know when you expect them to be published? So we had actually had the whole conversation about not holding these documents up before this came in, and it sort of lines up well. So, I don't think we have too much to discuss in preparing a response. We expect to draft one and send it. And if someone feels like giving us a draft rather than waiting for the chairs, we're welcome to take a look at it. And the way to submit that is you send it to the working group list and say, we propose this as a response. And if no one does it, the chairs will probably get it. Ooh, yes. All right. Balaj has said that he will help us with that. Thank you. And again, just send it to the list and say this is a draft, a proposed response. And this is a little boring. We all know how to work remote. We're well seasoned at this point. The main point in showing the slide is if you would like to use the working group resources for interims or informal meetings, they are available to you. And with that, we're going to move over to the first slot. And Joe, are you, oh, you are here. Awesome. All you say is next, and it'll magically happen.
Hello, I'm Joe Clark, and this will be short. This is about the syslog draft. No good deed goes unpunished. I offered to take on this work to push it through, since I know that there were some Cisco people who'd worked on it, and I really wanted to see it ratified. So I took that. Unfortunately, next slide, please. We only had, or I was only been able to give, or Kent was only able to give me the Rev 23. It was currently at Rev 26, the Rev 23 XML. So I had to backport a lot of the changes that had happened into that, so I could at least get an XML that looked like the what was published in 26. So we did that. Mahesh was generous enough to provide his build system, and he helped clean up some of this. So we got the 26 there, and then we updated things so that it had the right boilerplate and the right year and all of that, and passed ID NITs, and everything looked good. But then it was still broken. And the thing I want to focus on the most is what you see there in orange, the replace the old key store grouping in there with the crypto types asymmetric key pair with cert grouping. So next slide, and I'll show you. I realize this doesn't give enough context. This quote unquote cert changes in the draft. This is under the signed syslog container area in that draft. So if you support the feature of signing your syslog messages, you need a way of reflecting what cert you are going to use in order to sign that, and what key you want to use in order to sign or to use that cert. So I think I've picked the right grouping here. I think I've picked the correct thing that bundles. I had to change some of the text so you can see what it previously was, what it now is, and this seems to be restores the semantics of what this this grouping should do for allowing you to configure and support signed syslog messages. With this, so I would love to hear if I got it right, I got it wrong, but if I got it right, I feel that the draft is where it can be to do a last call and hopefully push it through for ultimate ratification. And I see Kent coming to the queue. Kent.
Yeah, hi, Joe. Thanks for taking on this work. Really appreciate it. I do think that you got it right. It may be just one minor thing. You have asymmetric key pair with cert plural grouping, and it might be asymmetric key pair with cert singular grouping. Both groupings exist, but what you want, I think, maybe with the singular, not plural. Regardless, I'll be shepherd for this, and we'll look at it again at that point.
I did look at both, and now that you're saying it and I'm on the hot seat, I can't remember why I chose this one, but I consciously chose this one after reading through the crypto types draft, but I would appreciate your insight was kind of what I was hoping to get. So thank you. But that is it. The next slide is just my call to action. On this, I would like the working group to kind of weigh in. If we're ready, I would like the last call, and we'll see if we can't get this one finished. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. And next we have node tags. Node tags. Sorry.
Hello, everyone. My name is Qingwu, and I want to talk about the node tag in Young Data Model. So this is a working group draft. The current version number is 08. Next. So a little bit of recapture. So what is this draft talking about? We know the Young module can comprise a set of data node, and data node in a Young data model, maybe in a single Young data model or several Young data model may share the same common characteristics or feature. For example, they both can be seen as some kind of KPI data. So node tag really want to capture this kind of characteristic data. And currently, node tag draft has already got a review from Young Doctor, and also the working group last call has been initiated, and we got a lot of comments, and thanks all the reviewers. And actually, one substantial comments actually about the mechanism defined in this draft, whether it is generic enough or target to some specific use cases. So for these comments, actually, we take offline discussion with the reviewer, Eugen, and we got a lot of suggestions. And we listed several questions here. We will, give a detailed discussion about this question and our answer. And you can see the current version 8 actually try to address all the comments during working group last call and a young doctor review. Next. So this is a change we made. Actually, we started from 0.6. We actually made a 2 update. Actually, the main change, actually, we changing the title. Since based on the discussion, we think no tag not only apply to some schema level tag but also instance level tag. So we change the title to reflect that, and also we actually update the introduction and abstract and try to make object more clearly to cover both cases, node level tag and instance level, schema level tag and instance level tag. And to make it more generic, actually, in original version, actually, we have several young extension. Actually, we have 3 extension like metric type and OPN tags that is not a metric enough kind of term. Actually, we try to consolidate into one generic young extension. Also, in the early version, we have object tag and a property tag. We think they are not important anymore, so we just remove it. And we actually we document clearly which tag can be catched, how application can be supported to resynchronize the deploying any update in the section 3 based on the comments from Yugen. And also, actually, we clarify schema level tag can be used in the XPath query in the section 3. And we also made several other changes in the appendix. So you can see that actually some of them just editorial change. Next. So to revisit the question we discussed with Yugen, actually we have 5 questions. Actually, try to go through these questions. Actually, the first question is about the node tag, whether it is schema level tag or instance level tag. Actually, our answer is, we cover both cases. Originally, we focused on schema level tag, but based on the many discussion, we think it would be useful to cover both cases. Actually, so for example, our design, we define the node ID actually as the node instance identifier. So this can fully support these both cases. So we update abstract introduction several section to try to reflect this. So for this one, actually, if anyone seems has any different opinion, please let us know. Next. The second one is about how node tag can be changed, whether the tag changes frequently or not. Actually, we know actually there's another RFC called module tag actually, which is RFC 8819. Actually, they support both system tag and user config tag. So actually, for this job, we also support both tag. So system tag can be seen as a schema level tag actually. So system client can add tags into the daynode list of daynode tags module if a module writer uses young extension to define the tags. So this usually to tag specific schema nodes, and actually usually this kind of tag actually are static, not changing frequently. But for instance level tags, so the client can dynamic to add or remove any tag on daynode instance during the running time stage actually. So this one actually it's possible. So you can see it's possible to change the tag, but we think also not frequently. Actually, you can see client A can add tag, client B actually can track these tag changes by subscribe these kind of tag changes. So client A actually tag changing can be automatically resync to client B. So we actually, this is based the discussion. Actually, we based on discussion. Actually, we actually make several.
That's someone else's microphone. I had to mute it. Thank you.
You're good.
Okay. So we actually, so you can see this kind of change actually in the introduction or sample use case section. We try to reflect this discussion in the current version 8. Next. So next is how tags are retrieved. So we, you know, actually, no tag actually can be retrieved, but we have we can retrieve the tag, we can retrieve the data, whether they, you know, can be retrieved together or they should be retrieved separately. So our answer is, you know, for tag actually, you know, tag retriever should be decoupled from the data retriever. So we have two ways to retrieve the tag. The first is we define the IETF node tags module, so we can, you know, allow the client to use standard protocol operation to retrieve the node tags to get this kind of tag. Another way is you can use the get schema operation to discover schema node tag. So this is you know, similar to the obviously 8819. Yeah, next. So question 4 is about a tag retrieval scale. Actually, I think this question also relate to the question 2. Actually, we in current version, actually we think we can use a standard protocol operation like get config get data to retrieve the tag, and we use a standard filter operation. So we have no intention to extend a filter operation for tag retriever. So tag will not use as a special selection filter. So we clarify this. And secondly, actually we have two type of tag: schema level tag, instance level tag. So for schema level tag, system only add one entry in the node, so the frequency, so the tag retrieval scalability is not a big issue. But for instance level tag, actually client can use like a edit config to add a tag or remove the tag. So the number of the tag the client manages is controlled by the client itself. So I think the scalability still can be controlled actually. So here we also discuss about, you know, this instance can be tagged with the different tags. So so this tag actually by design cannot be retrieved array, for example, 4 instance that is tagged with a different tag, for example, bar. Robert?
Hi, Jim. So Rob Wilson, so I just got a quick question on the first one about getting data. And you're saying you're going to use XPath filter for as the operation to basically select to just return data with a particular tag set. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so why did you choose to do it that way and not add an augmentation into the filter to say I want to just receive data that has this tag set? Because to me, XPath feels like quite an expensive way to do this, whereas a filter operation that just said I'm just looking for the data that is that's marked or tagged this way seems a lot cheaper computationally for the backend servers. So I was just wondering why you went that way and not the other way.
Actually, as we clarify, we just try to use a standard selection filter. We don't make a changes. So we think we can go this way, but it at a complexity. So actually we use this kind of tag actually, you know, to capture the some of common characters data actually. So what do you suggest?
So my suggestion is, I think you're saying you're going to use XPath. I guess it's doing with attributes or something to filter the data and the attributes to check against the tag. But I always see that XPath filtering is quite an expensive operation. I'm not sure necessarily whether all implementations support that or they just support subtree filters. I'm not sure how you do it with the subtree filter. Whereas if you look at like the NMDA netconf extensions, they augmented the get data operation, had new fields, new options for like limiting the depth of the amount of data being returned, or filter it on I was trying to think like the origin metadata. And I was wondering here whether that would be another option to have another augmentation to that to say filter on these tags. So it would just pull out the data that has that tag set, or maybe the descendant data that has that tag set, rather than using the XPath mechanism.
Yeah, we don't use XPath mechanism to get the data. Actually, this just you can use this kind of standard operation to get the data. You can do the for example, client get all the data. They can do the second level local filtering. So
let me sync up with you offline.
Okay. Next. Raj.
Balázs Daniel Eriksson. It's not exactly to this slide, just generally to the draft. You have these mask tags. And if you can use these mask tags to remove tags or mask tags that the model designer put there, I see that as a very uncertain mechanism, because maybe the module designer knew that this must be tagged X. And then the user comes and says, no X. I see that as a big problem. So is there a priority between somehow these tags and masking? I think that what the module designer decides should stand.
Yeah, this design actually borrowed the same concept from module tag of C, used to remove the tag. I'm not sure.
This will make some of our use cases impossible if the schema tags become so unreliable.
Schema level tag actually is kind of static.
Yes,
tag,
but if
right?
they are masked, then they are not static anymore, isn't it?
Yeah.
Perhaps discuss it on the list.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, we can take to the list for the discussion. This. Yes. Thank you. Next question. Yeah, next is about module writer guidance. Actually, there's two relevant questions. One is, we define the mechanism in this chapter. So how this relate to the metadata annotation mechanism? How this can be differentiated from metadata annotation. The other question is how this can be different from the simple Young extension statements for things that are static. So we compare the metadata annotation with the mechanism we define in this draft. Actually, we think metadata annotation actually usually are tied with a given data node instance. So usually the value of the metadata annotation is assigned by the server. For example, for origin value, it can be assigned by a server sent to the client to indicate the origin particular data instance. But for node tag, actually in defined in our job, actually retrieve essentially by they know the tag module. So this actually create or remove by the system client. So here we give an example. You can tag the schema tree to apply to a whole list. So this is can be differentiated. So the second is how this differentiated from the Young extension statements. Actually, we also give analysis actually for instance level tag and schema level tag. For instance level tag, actually, this usually only tags the data node, or rather than actually statement or data module. So we don't use the node tag to tag revision statement in the data module. But differently, actually, we can provide some of the additional auxiliary information or data node property. We give example in the appendix. And the schema level tag, actually, this can be deleted by the data node tag module and removed from operational data store. But such kind of tag, because it's kind of static tag, still exists in the Yang data module. So this still can be differentiated from the simple Yang extension statements. So yeah, next. So we will love to hear all the comments and try to resolve these. And for the next step, we want to hear guidance from chairs.
Yeah, there's clearly some comments in the room. On the list, it wasn't clear to me that Jürgen's comments were all addressed. And I know the last, he did not send any comments after the last update. So it would be good to make sure that his comments are addressed as well as any other comments that came in as part of that discussion.
Sure.
And it sounds like you have a couple of new comments. We really have to close those all out before we can.
Yeah. We take this offline with Jürgen and have several iterations. And the latest version, he hasn't confirmed all the changes. So we will, ping Jürgen again, take it to the list, get his confirmation.
Yeah, we are coming up on August, and that can be tough for a lot of people. But maybe we should, if we're not resolved by the end of August, we probably will schedule a interim to try to close it, to force all the issues to be closed. But look for the new emails. Sounds like you're going to get a couple from the room.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Next up. So we're going to do the overview of the Yang versioning discussion. We have 45 minutes on this, and I was just going to give you each 15 unless you want to do something different.
Might not take that long.
Okay.
We'll soon find out. Hello, everyone. Yes, this is the beginning of the 3 pieces on the Yang versioning solution update. Next slide, please. So we're going to have a little overview from myself, then we'll go on to individual drafts with Balash and Joe. Next slide. So a quick recap on the versioning solution. The complete solution consists of 5 drafts: updated Yang model revision handling, module semantic version number scheme, Yang schema comparison tooling, version Yang packages, which is my favorite, protocol operations for package version selection. And the working drafts can be found on GitHub at the moment with all the issues logged there. Next slide, please. And just a quick wrap, if you're having a look at wondering where some of these drafts are, those are the URLs. Next slide, please. So a brief overview of what we're doing on the weekly versioning calls at the moment. Authors and interesting parties, we are meeting every single week. These meetings are open to all. It's not a fixed list of attendees. We're having regular participation from 5 different companies. It is quite vendor heavy. I believe there's only myself and maybe one other who represents an operator. So if you are interested in versioning, package versioning, or anything of the sort, please do consider coming and joining in from those backgrounds. We're obviously bringing key issues back to the working group mailing list, and yeah, the times are there at the moment. So of course, if you'd like to join us in, and you can and you're able on those time zones, please do. Next slide. Thank you. To dive into it a little bit more deeply, the main focus of the weekly meetings at the moment, number 1 is processing the feedback from the last call on the module versioning and Yang assembler drafts. We've had a lot of complex discussions around this. It has taken quite a bit of debate, and a number of the weekly calls have been taken up with this. We're in the process at the moment of addressing each of those and posting responses back to the mailing list, and there will be some updates to the drafts required, quite likely. The second main piece of work at the moment is beginning to look at the schema comparison draft. The last call on module versioning draft made us realize that the schema comparison is fairly integral. We may move some parts of the schema comparison into module versioning per element, non-breaking changes or breaking changes tags, for example. We haven't yet looked at packages or version selection drafts. I believe, next slide, please. I think there's a note on here that we are heading in that direction. So our next steps, finish processing all the comments received on those two drafts. There are quite a few, as I've mentioned. Get all those back, get the drafts updated. We are expecting to do another working group last call for both of those drafts with the intention to bring them to RFC. We won't wait any longer for the remaining three drafts, comparison, packages, and selection. The work has taken quite a lot of time to converge, but the override is, of course, asking us for when the drafts will be completed, which has, I think, kicked things into higher gear. And of course, as I mentioned, more work will then continue on schema comparison, packages, and version selection. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think that's the end of that part. So we'll move on to, was it Balash next? I think.
Yeah, that was far less than 15 minutes.
Okay, I must take more.
Good.
So Balash Zangel, part of this weekly group and part of the author group. Next. We had one last call with some interesting comments and some basic comments. We released a new version, but that's mostly just to keep it up to date, so not to let it expire. And these are the main issues, heavily with the first one, whether we should have data node change on the module level, or is it enough to have, or is it better to have it on the individual data node or schema node level? Next, please.
It's Kent is doing it.
Okay. So we got the module versioning marking that says the change is not compatible, and it indicates, so it basically just indicates it's not compatible. And if you have Samver and the revision label for it, that would also give you an indication whether the changes are compatible, non-compatible, or maybe just editorial. And we could put these, our plan was to put this information on the module level, the revision information. We got a proposal that it's better to put it on the individual node level. And we agreed that...
just a quick comment, it might be better if you move the mic a little closer for the remote people. They're not hearing you too well. Or raise it or something.
So the authors or the weekly group's consensus is that both module level and node level are valuable, but they really serve different purposes. Next. Yep. Just a quick recap. This is what we originally planned. Put the marking into the revision information. This is basically a node level statement. Next. And this is how we believe a node level or schema node level statement would look like. This indicates that one leaf or one container or one item has changed. It indicates when it's changed, so you can track back that, you know, with the revision statements and the development steps, and maybe have some description also. These two are not either or. They can, the node and the module level can live side by side and help each other. Maybe editorial change can also be marked, but that's an open question. Next. So the alternative proposal was that we have to mark every NBC change, non-backward compatible change, without some annotation. And that means that if there's no annotation, then this is not changed or changed in a backward compatible or editorial way. And the consumers of the module will have to look through the scan the module to find what kind of changes happened in the last time. We think that this has problems. First of all, it might end up with a lot of such annotation, NBC annotations. And we have to remember that some other groups, SDOs, 3GPP, ORAN, I think Broadband Forum as well, they release modules multiple times a year. And that means that they will have more changes, they will have more NBC changes, and that might clutter up the module. And it will be difficult to find the containers between all these annotations. Also, can we convince all these groups to use this? It's not sure. And also, how do you handle deleted nodes? If the node is deleted, you can't put the marking that it is in an NBC change on something that's not there. And also, we see that it might be a problem that what if the author forgets to mark something as an NBC change? That would automatically mean something. It might be just a mistake, but now it became a backward compatible change. Next, please. So the weekly group came to an idea, consensus that in some cases, per node data change notifications are good. We should use them. And the authors may add them any place. But we should not say that if it's missing, that it implies something. If you have a list of 20 leaves and you forget the 15th forget to annotate the 15th, that doesn't mean you mean something. That means that you were tired and you forgot one from 20. So tooling should be used as much as possible to instead of these individual annotations. And that would also mean less text. Next. So mostly tooling can apply the versioning and other NBC rules that are already defined in the RFC and in the versioning draft. But it is not reliable everywhere because of multiple reasons. One is that, yep, sometimes it's just not possible to find out if it's the plain English text that for description changed. That might or might not be backward compatible. And for some complex statements like a regular expression, when, or a must statement, figuring out whether a regular expression change is compatible or not, that's very tough. Probably tools will not go into that details. So the authors will be allowed to mark anything, and they might say that, yes, this regular expression change is actually compatible, or it is actually non-compatible. Next. Yeah, so where should we? We agree that this per node annotations are good and useful in a limited way. So not for every node, but for nodes where we can't decide or a tool can't decide whether it is backward compatible or not. We have to define it somewhere. We said that we should put it in some draft. The idea originally was to leave it to the schema compression draft later. Now the idea was to at least define the extension itself in the module versioning draft, and then tool defaults and how it is exactly used, that could be left when we define how the tool actually works. But if that would allow the author to explicitly put in statements like, I changed the description and this is actually a non-compatible change because it really works differently. But we are not decided fully there yet, and yes, we need to hurry up because BBF already chose a versioning scheme. We don't want two other groups to choose versioning schemes independent of the IETF. Next. Okay, then the question came up, if something is really non-backward compatible, should we allow the author of the draft or author of a Yang module to say that, no, this is compatible even if according to rules it is not. And yes, we see that there are a number of use cases, things like back pattern change where actually the value space may not even change at all. Then evaluating these complex statements, the tool might not be able to do that. It's just too much for them. Another case is when we really correct mistakes. What if I allowed an IP address to contain 355 instead of 255? Yes, the pattern is changed incompatibly, but it is still not a real change because the IP addresses were not 355 earlier. And in some cases when all the clients are known, strictly for vendor modules, then even an incompatible change might be a don't care. Next. So that concludes our statement about this big proposal of the work group, last call, that yes, pair node annotations are good. We like them, but not generally, and they won't replace the module level annotations. They serve different purposes, and both are needed. The next question.
Do you want to ask if there's any questions
Yeah.
on that before moving on, or no one's come to the queue, but it seems like you would like some input.
Yes, any questions or opinions on this?
I think it's after lunch. And the energy level is low. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next topic that was discussed quite a bit during last call is this derived revision import or import by derived revision. Is it needed? Why is it done this way? What risks does it carry? Is it a compatible change to the original draft? Now, today we had these two methods for import, plain import, which means anything can be used. It has risk. And actually, in our own RFCs, we try to restrict what is imported using comments, or not comments, but description statements and references. Not very good. Or we can have import by exact revision, but that means that if the imported file is updated, then you need to update the importer. And that's a big work, very hard to coordinate, and it's not a good solution, which is shown by practically no one using it. So I scanned all the IETF modules. I think I only found one usage of import by exact revision. So we are asking for import by derived revision. Basic idea is that I have one or two new things. I need that by the importer needs it. And we want, but otherwise I don't want to update and I want to follow the revisions. We don't want to have a strict linkage between the revisions of the importer and the imported module, but we do need some kind of linkage. And this just enhances compiler. So if, let's say I have 5 revisions, if anything can be used, but if I tell the compiler that 2 are actually unsuitable, that's a big improvement. And if the compiler doesn't understand this import by derived revision extension, I'm no worse than before. It's still the same 5 that can be used. Next. Okay, so why did we do it this way, really? The most common problem was really that I need the new functionality in the imported module to be there, and I usually only need one or two or a few smaller items from the module, from the imported module, not all of the things. I also want to follow the updates if there are error corrections or just to avoid using very old modules. And we don't want to update all my importing modules all the time. And yes, there is this trade-off that either you specify a very precise and set of modules that you are willing to import, but then this gets complicated and restrictive. Or you specify something simple like what we propose, and then there are some risks. What things we didn't want to do is, one is that if a module is changed, the imported module is changed, but only some part, which I don't care. I don't want to update my modules for that. Also, we could, in earlier versions of this draft, we had very specific ways to, or statements, what we want to import. We had ranges of module revisions, excluding or or including additional ones, open-ended ranges, closed-end ranges. And all these niceties had logic behind them, and they became so complicated that no one understood them, except maybe the author. So we want to avoid that. And below we have a few examples where this import by revision, including newer functionality, was really, really needed and actually used already by text descriptions. Next, please. Okay, what do we expect from tool behavior? So one could say that this is a critical thing. If the new things are not included and we include some or import some old revision, then it's better to fail. Or we could do what 7950 says, that if you don't know the extension, like this import by derived revision, then just ignore it. And the consensus was that let's go with the 7950 behavior, because already to fail on this unknown extension, that would need updating the tools. And yeah, if we update it, why don't you update it fully? So we expect that these will just be ignored if not recognized by a tool. And then we have a small separate problem, the lower point, is about revision label scheme. We have revision labels defined. How do we know what kind of scheme that uses? Maybe there are multiple schemes that are slightly incompatible. So we have another extension, revision label scheme, that specifies actually what is the scheme for the revision label. Should we make the usage of this mandatory if and only if the revision label is present? And the idea is that for standard models, yes, please specify what your revision label scheme you are using. For other modules, vendor modules, this should be recommended. Yes, questions, comments?
So Robert and Cisco, so I want to speak actually back to the previous section. So at the moment, how the draft is specifying it is effectively saying on the revision or derived, if you support that extension statement, you can only select a module version that is derived from that specification. So it sort of limits the sets you choose. And we play a bit of a game in terms of saying that you're not really changing the behavior for a compiler that doesn't support this extension statement, because it could have chosen that module version anyway. It's sort of quite ambiguous what the behavior is. In the more recently in the authors group and things, we've had this discussion about a slightly alternative interpretation of that. So rather than having the revision or derived being this strict, it has to be a later version or not, it becomes a sort of suggestive approach. So it suggests a version that you should use, but doesn't mandate or require that. So a compiler would still be allowed to pull up or use an older version or different version that isn't in that classification of revision or derived. And effectively the suggestion there is if you do choose a version that's compatible and within the sort of selection criteria, that's great. And if for some reason you can't find that and you choose another version, then you might have a warning coming out during the compile saying that you're picking up an older version. And in many cases, it might be that it fails and you're missing a type or something, and so you can't compile things together. But it also might mean that if you have like branched histories, it allows you to use a Yang module on a different branch that might actually have the type you want because it's been added in 2 places, but it's not derived from that original thing. So it sort of solves that problem. But the reason that I quite like it is it also means that the behavior now is completely sort of consistent with not understanding this extension as well, because you're not ruling out which selection of modules you're using, you're just giving a hint to the compiler as to which one's a better one. So I don't know if there's anyone in the room if they understand my explanation, have any thoughts on that as to which way might be a better way to go, but we'd like to hear it if you do. Thank you.
Next, please. Then we had an issue with, we got no comments then, about revision label in the file name. The proposal is that we find it very useful to reference files with the revision label. It's much easier for people to recognize 3.3 than sometimes to recognize the exact date, especially if we have, let's say, multiple tracks. Yep. Using the revision label in the file name is just convenient. So now we have two possibilities for the file name. It can include the date with this @ sign, or it can include the revision label with a hash mark. Both are allowed. Actually, you can have in your file system the same Yang module with two different names. Actually, we already have this situation because you could have it one with or one without the data already. So I think we still would, we see the advantages of this. Next, please. And there was some discussion whether this whole versioning issue should be part of Yang 1.1 or as an extension, or should it go to Yang Next or Yang 2 or however it will be called. And yes, we agree that this should go to Yang 2 and it should become a mandatory part of Yang 2, but that doesn't mean we should stop working and we should wait for Yang 2 or Yang Next, because that takes a lot of time. So do it now in Yang 1.1 as extensions and integrate it into Yang Next whenever that happens. So yes, it's needed urgently. Don't wait.
I actually went, this is Lou, I went through my notes on this one because I felt like we discussed this at the last meeting, but I didn't see it in the minutes. So I thought it would be good to state here again that I believe this was the consensus at the last meeting, although it's not supported by the minutes.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's my last slide. Any questions, comments?
Yes, how do we get to the point where the document is done to the, and we have no more questions so that we can press forward with it at last call and publish?
I think the idea is to have one more last call, at least for the, so we have a few decisions on these issues. Can you go back to slide 1, please?
Remember, you're talking to Kent.
Okay, Kent, can you go back to slide 1, please?
Yeah, you listed a whole lot of questions, and I was sort of expecting to ask for specific feedback, because it would be good to close on these so we can, as I said, press forward.
I think we kind of settled on most of the issues. Maybe where to place the per node extension, that's an open one. And we need to add that. If we settle that, then we need to add this to the current versioning draft, maybe a second last call to agree that it's finalized, and then, yeah.
Okay,
it
so
should not be much change except of that, as I see.
Then what I'm hearing is, even though they're presented as questions, you think they're pretty non-controversial, and that you would expect that any objections would be brought up on the list, and hearing none, you will proceed with a new version that captures your conclusions.
Yes.
Okay. All right, that sounds like a plan to me. I just didn't like leaving it with open questions, and we're here to close issues. So thank you. So with that, I forget who's presenting next. Are we back to Joe?
All right. Well, this is an update. Balash, you're tall. This is an update on the semantic Yang Semver, the semantic version like revision label scheme. So next slide, please, Kent. So the current status, we did release an 07. There were very few comments from Jürgen that were addressed in here. Semver, the way it's written on their website, the Semver 2.0.0 website, is capital S, capital V in the camel case there. So we did that to make a visual disambiguation between the Semver 2.0 spec, and I use the air quotes for those not in the room, can't see on video, because they did in fact change 2.0.0 multiple times, but never increased their own revision or version number. But we did anchor to the one that we are using, and we clarified some of the use of our semantic version, the concept of semantic versioning, as opposed to the Semver, the spec, and the Yang Semver specifically. There is more to do there. There's more text to be added. There is a GitHub issue on that. We've been focusing a lot more on just, as Balash mentioned, addressing some of the issues, but to Lou's question, we need to shore up the text, so have like a focus session on each one of these drafts, shore up the text with the responses to the comments, and then get another more detailed revision out. We also fixed some a typo in the prefix, small things, like I said, and we compressed the acknowledgement section. Not to say we removed acknowledgements, we just made it taking up less space on the page. Next slide, please. So that's the boring stuff. The more interesting stuff are the outstanding issues, or is the outstanding issues. The big thing, and Balash hinted at it, that was raised, Semver, if you look at a semantic version, a Yang Semver string, let's say, you can't tell unambiguously and authoritatively where it derived from. And that was never the intention. We'll get to that. Revision labels are not designed to be linear. They're designed to anchor you to a revision. And just like that, in fact, I shamelessly stole Balazs's slide. We'll look at that again. It's Semver, but it isn't. And we'll get to that. I have a slide for it. For those who can't wait for the movie, it isn't, but it can be. Yang Semver is trying to encode the release train. It may seem that way. We have a lot of vendors on the call, but you could, in fact, create your own revision label scheme that honestly does encode the release train. And Andy brought up an issue. There was too much work involved or too noisy to bump the Yang Semver for work in progress. And we'll talk about each one of these. Next slide, please, Ken. And this is Balazs's slide. He did a great job. He did a great job on this, man. The idea here is, no, you can't tell just by looking at the Semver. Like in this example, or I should say in the top example, that if you have a 1.0.0 and you have a 1.1.0 and then you see 2.0.0, you can't say that 2.0.0 contains everything that 1.1.0 has, because it, as you can see from the slide, it derived directly from 1.0.0. So while your brain might logically assume that, well, they made a minor revision to 1.1, surely they just added some things that they put in 2.0. There's no way to know that. What you do know is that 2.0.0 points to a revision, and I can look at that revision, and then I can work my way up using the Yang module versioning work and say, it derived directly from 1.0.0. So that I know. There may be stuff in 1.1.0 that isn't reflected in 2.0.0. And yes, it would be nice if we knew directly that the 2.0.0 must include, but because branching, the fact that branching exists at all is there, it means we can't know that. It's not the labeling that breaks this knowledge. It's the fact that Branching is allowed. Even in the base SimVer, I can do this. As long as I constantly work linearly, as long as I always say that once I come up with a new major release, I'm never going to do anything back on the minor, or sorry, on the previous major, then you know that it's always going to derive from wherever you were in that point. I'm never going to go back. I'm going to do 1.00, 1.10, 2.00, and I'm never going to go back and create a 1.2.0. But that's not the case. We know that's not the case. We're not enforcing that. Just like Tom mentioned in his intro, we're just saying this exists, and we're allowing authors to signal it through the module versioning, and then by extension, the revision labeling. So it's not the labeling that breaks this. It's not the labeling that causes this confusion. It's the fact that branching can happen. And what we're trying to do is give you a more human readable anchor point, the revision label, that gives you something that says, okay, I can look at that and I can kind of get from what I know of SimVer. I know that between 1.1.0 and 2.0.0, there are some potentially breaking things, non-backwards compatible things that might affect me. And now I'm going to go and look at that further. That's what we're doing with the revision label. Next slide, please. I'm pausing a little bit just to see if there's any questions. Okay, it's SimVer, but it isn't. It's a dessert topping, it's a floor wax, it's both. Yang SimVer can be 100% SimVer. We have additional additives. We have the underscore compatible and the underscore non-underscore compatible. You don't have to use them. If you want to do things that is more, that is in line more with a straight capital S, capital V SimVer, you can do that. In fact, the IETF, we don't ever expect to see underscore compatible or underscore non-underscore compatible. What we do expect to see is things that look more and behave more like the true SimVer 2.0.0 for that spec that we reference. So SimVer, our SimVer, Yang SimVer is a superset of the SimVer 2.0.0. And you can choose to use the pure SimVer spec, though there is an action for us. We have to clarify what is unique. We have it in there, but we need to, in no uncertain terms, spell it out that underscore compatible, underscore non-underscore compatible, these are unique to what we're proposing. The rest, completely in line with the rules of SimVer. You can use the rules of SimVer with your revision label scheme. You can declare a revision label scheme that is SimVer and follow those rules. You can follow those rules with our Yang SimVer. You don't have to use compatible, non-compatible. Next slide, please. Aha. I hope I understood this correctly. We are not necessarily encoding the release train of software into the Yang SimVer. What we are doing is reflecting what changed in the module at a high level. We're reflecting that. We're saying, if you remember that picture 2 slides ago, that if I had 1.1.0 and I was using it, and now I am using, or I have a module I produce a module 2.0.0, that there are potentially, well, there are non-backwards compatible changes in 2.0.0 from 1.1.0 or from 1.0.0. They may affect you. They may affect the work that you're doing, the tooling that you're creating, the interaction you have as a client with the server that supports that new version. We are not necessarily reflecting the underlying software of the server, meaning the features, the capabilities of the software release train of the vendor. A vendor could come up with their own scheme. I work for Cisco. Cisco could come up with our own scheme for revision label that really reflects the iOS XR version if we wanted to. But what we're trying to do here with Yang SimVer is give that high level understanding. You can look at it in a quick glance and say, I know that there are, and you can read the draft, non-backwards compatible changes between this version of a module and that version of a module. Or I know there are potentially, there's minor changes, there are backwards compatible changes, things I might be interested in learning about, or I know there's only editorial changes. It's just some typo fixes. No semantic changes between these two. That's what we're trying to convey with Yang Simver. Next slide, please. Okay, I actually like this bumping the work in progress, but I realize that it is work. From what I have seen working at a vendor, there is a tendency to implement work in progress drafts, especially ones that are long running. People look at that and they go, that's interesting. I want you to do that. Okay, and so as a product manager goes, yeah, we want to make money, we'll do this. How do you know what they implemented, what version they implemented? Well, there might be in the documentation some draft that says, okay, I implemented in this version of our product, draft dash netmod dash something. Maybe netmod was a bad example there, but whatever, you might see that. But how would you reflect that with a Yang module? What we want to be able to do is say specifically that every release or every revision of a Yang module in a draft, if you've made changes to it, we want you to bump that Semver label, that revision label, and have it be, the rule is it has to be unique. So we bake in the draft name and its revision, and we do the name in there because there can be parallel work streams working on the same, revising the same Yang module. So we have the draft name in there with its revision. That keeps it unique. So we can always use that as an anchor point to find the revision, to find the inheritance and the changes that happened within that module. If you change the draft, but you do not change the Yang module, if you're just adding contextual text, explaining things, updating the formatting of the Yang tree, you don't change the module, you do not have to change the revision label, just like you don't have to change the revision. But if you make a change such that you change the revision of that Yang module, then you have to update the Semver as well, the revision label. We need to make that text a little clearer in the write-up as to why and when you make those changes. And it was brought up because I released a new version of the Yang Semver draft, but the Yang, there is a Yang module in that draft. The revision label didn't change. And I said, well, we didn't make changes to the module. So if you implement this mod, nothing has changed. So we don't want to gratuitously bump the revision, and we don't want to gratuitously bump the Semver revision label either. We think that makes sense. Next, sorry, very sorry. Next slide, please. I think that's it. Ken?
That's the last slide. That was the last slide.
That is the last slide. Okay. So that is the update on Yang Semver with some of the work that we still have to do. Questions? All right. Thank you.
I guess I have one question. This is Lewis, contributor. Are you assuming that you never used the date with Semver based on the previous draft?
Are you assuming that you never used the date? You could use the date. What do you could?
I'm thinking about how to, if both the date, the previous semantics, if I read it correctly, allowed for both.
Correct.
It wasn't either or, it was both.
In the revision or derived?
No, in the previous draft.
You mean the file name or? Because
In the module
in
version.
the module, we
version-
don't change the revision statement, so that must include the date just as today.
Yes.
This will be a extensive.
So would you
statement
expect the
under it.
date to change in the version not?
No.
They would both stay the same.
They would, so if I'm making a
I
change.
just felt like it's not, it
If
wasn't clear.
one changes, then the other must. They
Yes.
must work in synchron. They both
Yes.
So in the-
identify the
it-
version.
So in the case where we have an updated draft, where you do not change the semver, what happens to the date?
The date should not change either.
Okay.
I-
Alright.
If I don't make a change to the module, I shouldn't update the revision of the
Oop.
module because it's identical to the previous. I mean, you could, it would, to me, it's a gratuitous change.
I agree with you. That's what you usually see with drafts. At least I'm used to seeing people update the
I've seen
dates.
both, to be fair to you. I've seen it. Yeah, I
So I think it would be good just to be clear what the expectation is in
Absolutely.
the document.
totally agree with you.
And Somerset Liquid. Is there anything wrong with gratuitous version bumping?
I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with it. I guess this gets to the noise bit that Andy was raising, that if you keep bumping these, you keep incrementing. So there's a few sets of tools that extract Yang modules and add them to the file systems of like Git repositories. You just keep adding on to that, and you're not, and you could interrupt people like, oh, I've got this new version I've got to look at, only to find out that it's the same as before. It just adds work where it seems like, Git doesn't really allow you. I used just Git because I've been using it a lot this week. If you do a Git commit and you haven't made any changes, it says you can force it, but it just seems like, why create that churn?
Sure, I'm just trying to take the parallel from pure development space, where I'm trying to also get my head around the whole version tracking, and it's semver but not semver, and I just think it might actually help if we working towards this idea that we don't have these version branches. I mean, if we look at the development flow, you've got branching, but you also have merging. You merge back your features into the parent thing, and then that follows semver properly. It's, from me personally, I think, and I'm new to the room, it just feels like we're adding confusion. But I do take your point about gratuitously bumping stuff and why that might not be a good thing.
The merging is interesting because you can look back at that history and you can see that a branch has been merged back in. Here we don't have the linearity of like looking back in a Yang module. You could still reflect that. If you did in fact merge, you could say that, okay, I merged I merged some of these features, and from if you had the revisions, you would be able to in fact see that, okay, this 2.0.0 really did extend from one, but looking just at 2.0.0 compared to one, just looking at those two strings together, you don't know for certain where they inherited from. You have to do the upward tracking to find out if there was a merge and where that merge happened and when that merge happened. So I think we still get that. It's just not visually comparing the two semver strings. Charles.
Yeah, Charles Eckel. And, I just think it's, there's different consumers of these drafts and the Yang models they contain. And I think some of the consumers of those will be following, the work of the IETF data tracker. They'll know when a new draft comes out. So for them, it's probably not a big deal. But I think there's a lot of consumers of this that really just care about the Yang modules. And for them it's just better if they don't see a change, I would think. If nothing changed, like, I would save them the extra work and the churn and, hey, why does this thing keep changing? So I think it's better for them if you don't. So I would say while it's not horrible to gratuitously update, I think it's better not to.
And I take the comment from you, Lou, that we can be better about describing that and being extra explicit.
Rob Wilson, Cisco, I was just going to reply back to Ant's comments and things. So I think our aim and our goal here is to try, even for the vendors, to get a sort of linear development of the Yang model. So that's what you want. That's what you're aiming for. And the case where the branching turns up is because we've shipped to release and we've got a bug fix we need to put onto that, and we can't easily update that order release to the latest Yang model because it's got a load of other code that we don't want, and that's where you get the branching. So it's sort of quite limited stub branches. And I would expect the stuff that you're adding into those branches as bug fixes are either going into the mainline anyway, or either way around, whichever way you put them. So you could mark the merging to say you've done that, but it depends which way. It depends which one gets written first, I guess. So you won't always have that. It might be you've done the fix on the main line and you're backporting it to older releases.
So I just brought up the outstanding issues to make sure the room and everyone understands the plan is you're going to do an update.
Mhm.
And you think you're going to be ready for last call once that update's done, or you think you have more issues to discuss?
You want my honest opinion?
Yes.
I honestly think getting people on the call who are going to be vocal about this would probably work the best to close these out once and for all, rather than just doing another round of email last call, even though I know process-wise we have to do that. That's my honest opinion.
All right. So what you're saying is you'd like to do a new version and publish. Submit for publication.
I would like to do a new version. I think the last call is important, but I think if in going back and forth on the last call, we might be able to hammer more things out if we did like an interim, getting the passionate people together to have that conversation more live than an email. Now I've opened a can of worms.
So Rob Wilson, not with my AD hat on. So it's just got an observation here that the people who've been raising lots of these issues during the working with us calls, unfortunately, are not able to make this meeting. So they're not here. So we're discussing all these issues, but the main people we want to have those conversations with, the other side are not here. So it's making it hard to resolve them. And we can try and resolve them over email. We spent a lot of time discussing them within the authors and like on these weekly meetings, and a lot of considerations gone in. But I think in most cases we've had some tweaks and enhancements and things, but a lot of it is we think we're on the right track and we need to get this through. So so my view as a contributor is we need to put the updates into new versions of the documents. We need to do another working with last call and a proper full one to say, look, this is where we're going to get, and then flush them out. We need to do an interim after that to resolve those. I don't know, but
so what you just captured, I think, is the chair's plan.
Okay.
So if everyone is okay with that, and I know you would maybe prefer not, but you can live with it. And if everyone's okay, we're going to proceed that way. So we look forward to seeing the update, and the working group should look forward to the last call, second last call. Thank you. No, thank you. All right. We are now going to move on to the non-chartered items. Shifeng?
Yeah, hello.
Your name
Can you
correctly?
hear me?
Yes, you sound good. Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. So hello everyone. This is Tu Fang from Huawei, and on behalf of the authors and contributors, I will give a presentation about system-defined configuration work. I will present remotely. So actually, this work has already been presented for several times. And at the same time, there are a lot of good discussion on the mailing list. And so many folks have shared their excellent ideas and provided a very great input. So thank you all. Based on a lot of discussion, I think we do have reached some agreements which are already be written in the current version of the draft. And the very first one is that config true read-only system data store to hold configuration, which is provided by the system itself. So the system data store is read-only to clients, which means that any edit operation to modify the contents of this data store directly must be denied. but system may change dynamically, for example, when the device upgrades or hardware resources available. And the second one is that any reference system configuration in system must be present in running. We had a really vigorous discussion about whether offline validation of running alone is required. And to avoid the changing the definition in 7950 and 8342, and also not to break any legacy clients which relies on the validation of running alone, we agreed that the validation of running is required, so as to say any reference system configuration in system must be present in running. The third one is about a resolve system parameter, which controls whether to allow a server to copy any reference system defined configuration automatically. This provides convenience to ensure the second bullet. We can say that since any reference system configuration must be present in running, and a client can copy the reference node from system to running explicitly, but manual copy and paste may not be desirable. So we do allow a client to carry a resolve system flag in their edit config or edit data operation so that a server can resolve the reference and copy the reference system configuration automatically. But if this parameter is not provided, the server should not modify running in any way not specified by the client. And this is the last bullet point. In the previous version, it was a very strong restriction to say that the server must not modify running if not asked. But to avoid any potential non-backward compatibility, and after some discussion on the mailing list, we weakened it and just said that it should not modify running if not asked. So it is preferred that a client can control configuration in running as much as possible, and running is only updated by the client. A client can benefit from such a behavior, which should work as a best practice. So Blush, do you have something to say? I saw you in the queue.
Yes, Balázs Eriksson. To the last bullet, I objected last time and I still have to object that there are people out there who are using Yang, for example, 3GPP, and who prescribe that the system must modify running in some cases. So putting such a should not here, I don't like it.
We used to have some discussion on the mailing list, and there was some agreement to say that we would like a client control objective to say that a client would like to when the client retrieves running, he would like to get what was exactly said to the server. So we used to have a client control objective, but I think this should not is work as that best practice, not a restriction. If you have some other design consideration, you can still follow your principle. So just should not a really restriction, I think.
Many nodes have onboard O&M automation, and then that would also violate this, and the discussion whether that's an onboard client or the system itself changes it, that's philosophical. So yeah, we don't seem to agree. Thank you.
Okay, Rob, do you want to say something?
Robert and Cisco as a participant, I think the should not's right here. I think that otherwise it's sort of breaking how the whole Yang ecosystems have been designed to work. I do take Balázs's point though, that I would say in that case, if you've got automation running on the device, you treat that as another client, and that's fine. I have no issues then it's modifying it. But it's still ultimately, if that's under the client control and they can turn that off or turn it on and do whatever they're doing, that's fine. So so maybe that's the get out clause, but I think this is right in my view.
Okay. So Kent.
Yes, hi, Kent Watson as a contributor. I also think this is right, but I want to note that there's existing RFC, the one that defines the crypt hash, and specifically it's for user management and for how to specify user passwords. And it says specifically that if you, and it defines it in the description statement, that if the password sent from the client to the server begins with $0 it means that the text thereafter is clear text, and it's expected that the server will replace with an actual hashed password and store it on the server that way. And then when retrieved back to the client, it will be, of course, not the same as what the client had sent. It will then be hashed. So I think that's an example of an already existing RFC that doesn't really follow the should not principle, but it's okay because they described it. I mean, the best practice stands, even though the description statement's there. I think it's perfectly reasonable for that to be the case.
Okay, thank you. So Jason?
Okay.
Jason?
Hello. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Jason Stern. I agree. I like that second bullet that basically is saying the running should be valid and should be able to be offline validated. And that my big concern is that at some point, and maybe we're never going to look at it, but NMDA mentions that some of the translations from running to intended include templates, configuration templates, and that for me is a big problem here. And I'm hesitant to tangle up this work in templates, but I'm worried that we might say running always has to be valid, and then when we tackle templates at some point, I don't know how that can work with running being valid. So I know you won't have an answer, Chifeng, but it's a concern that maybe for some discussion as part of this work.
Yeah, we said that running must be valid is reference from the 7915, and instead of that we can just say that any reference system configuration in system must be present in running, but whether that would ensure that running must always be valid because of we can have some template expansion issue, maybe that will cause running invalid. I'm not sure. I think the template maybe should not be included in in the scope of this work now. So
yeah,
we can have more discussion.
That could be. I'm worried about being so strict about the running, and then we just reverse that when we figure out templates. But okay, that's something just to be discussed.
Yeah, okay, I understand your point. So Rob?
So I'm going to try and avoid going down the rat hole that Jason's putting in front of us. So I think already, actually, though, at least NMDA says that running has to be valid, but let's park that and templates and outside. I just want to go back to Kent's comment, and it's like, yes, I think that's a great example of why this is a should not at the bottom and not a must not. I think there's a good case of why you pragmatically makes sense to modify it to keep the data safe. So that's fine, but I think clients would cope with that. So makes sense to me.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on. Since last IETF meeting,
it would be actually good to try to wrap up because we're now over time.
Okay, I will be quick. So since last IETF meeting, Blush has read some comments to help improve the document. And thanks, Blush, very much for your review. And based on that, the following updates have been made. Change the system behavior of modify running from must not to should not if the result system parameter is not given by the client. I think we have already discussed it just now. And then define a RESTconf compatibility URI for result system RESTconf query parameter. So since we updated the RESTconf protocol to support a new resolve system parameter for post and put method, and this capability can be used for a RESTconf client to discover if a RESTconf server has implemented the resolve system parameter. And we also augmented the copy config RPC operation to support resolve system as input parameter, since we only extend the edit config and edit data operations to support this parameter in previous versions. And we think that copy config could also be useful when you copy the configuration from an offline file to running data store, and the parameter may be needed to allow the server to copy reference system configuration into running automatically to keep running valid. Then we have also made several editorial changes for clarification and explanation, which includes that a more clear definition of system configuration states that system configuration is created in system and appears intended. Applied system configuration also appears in operational with origin equal to system. Make it clear that system must always be valid, and make it clear that any update in system will not cause the automatic update of running, even if some of the system configuration has already been copied into running explicitly or automatically before the update. And finally, that we clarify the relationship between read-only to clients and overriding system configuration, which seems contradictory at first glance. When we say that read-only to clients, it refers to the contents of system data store the client is not allowed to modify directly, but the client may override a system-defined data by writing the intended configuration into running. So read-only and overriding system configuration, they look conflicting, but they are different. So this is the last real content slide. So I see a poll.
Okay, so a question to the group. I should have given you a little more warning, but we would like to know if you are interested in the working group continuing to discuss this. So we're going to hold for just a moment. We have 37 people. Hopefully we can get a little bit more of participation. So the way this is trending, it's clear the group is interested in your work. So we look forward to seeing the next revision of the document, and for you to continue discussing it on the list as you have been. So thank you very much. And you have another slot now, and maybe if you can, 8 minutes.
Okay, so then this is about the Yang extension and metadata annotation for immutable flag. And we have Blush joined this work since last IETF meeting. So this slide is about the use cases that promoted this draft. I try to use some diagrams to clarify, and hopefully they can help. There are two examples. The first one, which is shown on left side of the slide, an interface data tree. The root is the container node interfaces, and its child, which is an interface list node, exists in two interface entries. Inside each one, we have the name as the key node, interface type, and MTU value. We can see these two interfaces as the system-defined ones when the device is powered on and the related hardware is present. And a client may try to edit some of the system predefined values. For example, a client may want to change the interface type Ethernet into tunnel with an edit config operation, for example, or try to modify the MTU value. But if a client trying to set the type of interface GE0/0/0 other than the predefined ones, which does not match the real type of the interface, the server will reject that request. while the configuration such as MTU created by the system is free to be modified by the client. So for this example, interface type is immutable and independent of how it is instantiated. The immutability is uniform inside different interface instances. So while in the right diagram, the case is different. Let's say that we have an applications module to define some application layer protocols. And in this case, the application is defined as a list, which is a child node of applications. And within the application list, there is a protocol name, which is as a key, and the underlying transport protocol, TCP or UDP, and the port number. And for the convenience of the users, the system predefines a number of common applications, much more than just SSH and TFTP shown in the diagram. And those predefined ones are read-only and cannot be modified or deleted. If the predefined ones do not meet the requirements of the client can define their custom applications. For example, a SSH application with TCP and 22,000 as the SSH port, and modification or deletion to the custom application instance is allowed, but the predefined ones are read-only. Both system-defined and user-config applications can be further applied in security policies for application access control. So in this case, application list can exist in multiple instances, but some of them are immutable while others are not. So there are two different kinds of use cases of immutable flag. Here I'm using system configuration as examples, but do remember that the immutable concept can be used outside of system configuration. So to be more specific, we agree that it is already the case today that a server can reject any configuration for any reason. For example, when a client is trying to modify an immutable configuration, but this work tries to provide more visibility to the client as to which nodes are immutable. I think the client can benefit from such a standard behavior, a standard mechanism which allows it to see what configuration is immutable on devices. So the preferred solution consists of two parts, both an immutable YARN extension and a mandate annotation. And for YARN extension, we allow an argument to named exceptions defined to indicate specific operations are permitted. For example, if a create exception is declared for a particular data node, it means that the client is allowed to create the instance of that node, but modification and deletion is not allowed. And for mandate annotation, it's used to indicate that once a particular instantiated data node is created, the client cannot update or delete it. And this annotation is only applied to the list or leave list entries or instances inside the particular list entries. And currently, it is defined as a Boolean type, but if we can agree with this solution, we may discuss later if a simple true or false is enough. So since the immutability can be applied to a node both in the schema tree and in the data tree, we make a statement that the server should not return annotation if a particular node is already marked as immutable by YARN extension without exceptions for update or delete operations, because that means the update or delete any instance of the data node is not allowed. So there is no need to annotate the instance repeatedly. That will provide no additional information. So any comments on this? Anthony?
Hi, and Somerset Liquid. Immutable by its very name means you cannot modify, update, or delete. And I just noted there that you're saying exceptions to specific operations, and then you've given examples of create, update, and delete. I think we might just need to clarify that if we're talking about things like sub-objects, which we may be able to create, but the parent cannot be touched. Because otherwise exception suggests that the object is not immutable.
Okay. So Blanche? Do you want to say something?
Yes, I think this might be a misunderstanding because this immutable with extension or with exceptions means that you can create it, but you can't delete it, for example, or you can say that you can create it or modify it, but not delete it. So maybe the immutable is not the best name. That we can agree on that, and any suggestions are welcome. But, okay,
Yeah.
we can call
Yes.
it locked.
Okay.
And Balazs, you just gave a example where there were 2 exceptions, and it's not clear in the draft how you support that, but I'm glad to hear it does. Rob?
So
To
Rob,
Rob Wilson, yeah, Rob Wilson, as a participant, I'm really conflicted with this work because I don't like the fact that you're sort of potentially stopping clients from modifying or controlling the configuration, which is something that they own. But at the same time, I can also understand that if servers are doing this and going to reject it anyway, then it's just adding extra information to make it easier for them to do it. So my conflict is, are we going to then encourage more server implementations to then choose not to do this or have more restrictions and make it hard for clients to manage? Another way of thinking about this, though, is about putting the of modifying the running configuration that the client has control over versus what's in like system configuration. So even you delete it from the running config, it's saying, well, it's going to still be there in system. And that's another way of thinking about it. So that could be another way of phrasing it. And the last point I want to make is, again, like in interfaces and things, be very clear about the fact that you can delete the interface and its type, but you just can't delete the type itself. And once that's been set, you can't change the type. So maybe the draft is clear on that point, but I've not read the latest version.
While we hear the next question, there is a poll going on. Same question as the last time. Are you interested in us continuing?
While this could encourage bad behavior, I rather see this draft as documenting what people are actually doing. And in some cases, this is reasonable and existing behavior. There is running code actually implementing this in a major implementation. There are other standard bodies who prescribe this kind of behavior. So better tell than just do it in plain English text.
Joe Clark, Cisco. I think Rob touched on the thing that I was concerned about looking through this, and that is I see a lot of language the server must reject, the server must reject. And I was going to get up here and say, well, if this is an extension and certain Yang clients can ignore it, and you also mentioned SNMP and other non-Yang related things, it's really not must reject. Okay, they will reject, but they would have rejected anyway. And I think that is probably worth calling out more explicitly in the text to indicate that this is, like Balazs, you just said, more of a documentation, more of a clarification than a, by nature of this extension, is the server is enforcing this. The server would already enforce this. And that wasn't clear to me in reading the draft.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so we are actually at the end of our time, Shifang. So I think the takeaway that I see from this poll is that there's still interest in hearing more. And I think your plan was just to do another update and then discuss on the list. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, so since we still have an open issue, so I will ship that into the mailing list. I know we're running out of time, so just put this open issue to the mailing list.
Yeah, thank you. Do appreciate it, and it's clearly work that the group is interested in. So that's really good to see the contribution. Thank you. I actually got rid of the poll. I don't know why it's still showing it. Oh, there we go. Thank you, whoever maybe can't fix that. In the last 10 minutes, we had 2 topics we were going to try to hit. One of them is Yang Next, and the other one is from our AD. Kent, rather than having a large discussion on Yang Next, do you want to just summarize sort of where we are and what our discussion has been and our thinking?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks. So On Monday, the NetConf working group, had a chair-led discussion at the very end, prompted by AD Rob Wilton on, whether or not NetConf should, what we should do about the RESTConf Next and NetConf Next issue trackers. And one of the things that was mentioned is that in Netmod, there's also the Yang Next issue tracker, and that any update to Yang would necessitate updates to NetConf and RESTConf. Well, anyway, the takeaway is that the NetConf working group is going to do what it can to make updates to the protocols without requiring updates to Yang. But then here in this working group, what to do? It was mentioned, this has been discussed before. I think actually initially we started talking about Yang Next, 4 years ago, it seems. And then we touched on it again not too long ago, perhaps it was a year ago. And the takeaway is that it's intrusive and we're unsure if the market will accept an update at this time. But at the same time, we see that it's getting old and at the edges, and we might a refresh. It seems imminent or looming. But one thing also is that it was noted any update to Yang needs to, or I should say, let me be more specific. Any update to ROC 7950 would necessitate first a refactoring or factoring out of all the netconf and XML bits that are in 7950 to basically make it a protocol independent specification, not tied to netconf. And so some of the discussion that's been going on with the chairs and the AD is that the Netmod working group should proceed with a 7950 biz that does not change the Yang version. It would still be Yang 1.1, but it would basically remove all the netconf and XML specific bits from it. And that would lay the groundwork for then the serious Yang Next updates to come in, and for those non-compatible changes that we know are coming, but we need to do this first part first. So that's the current plan or thinking, and just wondering from the room if there's any agreement to that, and also if there's any interest in working on that. Certainly. If anyone's interested in working on that, please approach the chairs. Thank you.
So I think the best way to do this is if you have any specific thoughts or objections to a basically editorial revision of the RFC that splits out the language portion from the netconf portion. If you have any thoughts or objections on that, now would be a good time to hear it. I'm not seeing any. So then the last question on that topic is, if you are willing to work on it, please contact the chairs, or even better, submit a individual draft on it and help us get started. Thank you. Rob.
So actually, I think that Martin might already have some starting text here, so we should sync up with him as well. Okay. So that might help, but I don't know. So this is spend 5 minutes just to talk about. I gave a presentation to the ISG at the retreat about how we manage Yang models in the IETF, and I had some proposals there about how we potentially try and do things a bit differently. And they were quite positive of trying to do things a bit differently, and said, "Well, off you go and take it to Netmod and see what they say." So. I don't think we've got time to get many answers here, but hopefully I'll open up what the issue is and the ideas, and we can maybe start and see if there's people interested in trying to go down this path. So today, the IETF is really slow at publishing Yang models. We sort of know that, that's fine, and we're working on lots of different Yang stuff. So we can go to the next slide. I don't think in this audience we need to say much. And the goal of what we're trying to produce here is not individual Yang models to individual protocols. We're trying to develop a cohesive API between the management client and the device for managing it. So although we define these as separate Yang models, really what matters is, do these things work together and solve all the problems and things and implement all the functionality you need. And we're doing some work in there to help that with Yang packages to bring these things together. But still in the IETF, we have this goal, as does OpenConfig, for doing cohesive API. Next slide, please. We've got some problems though. So we're not very focused in the IETF at doing this cohesive API. The way we split it out into different working groups, we parallelize that in terms of getting the Yang models done, but we don't have the sort of focus on one API that OpenConfig had. Some of the RFC 7950 update rules make it hard to fix them. We're working on versioning and things to help that. But IETF is way too slow. I mean, maybe it's massively too slow here, and OpenConfig is getting more traction in the market. And if we want IETF to remain relevant in terms of the Yang models that it's producing, we need to change. And finally, the fractured market I don't think is good. I don't think that's helping Yang adoption. I think that's making it harder for operators to choose which path to go. Next slide, please. And OpenConfig, they had problems as well because they churn very frequently. In terms of their participation, it's not so open, even though its name's OpenConfig, and the models and the design of them are less technically flexible. So they have issues. They're not perfect either. It's not like we can just say take OpenConfig and we're done. So next slide, please. Next slide, I can skip that because that's fine. What's all the remaining problems to deal with? So this issue about the IETF not being focused on a cohesive management API, that's something we definitely need to fix. I think the Yang packages work, I hope, will help with that and start with that, because we'll be defining sets of Yang models that work together and hopefully finding some of the gaps and fixing those. So that's one thing. We're already fixing the 7950 rules to allow you to do the version upgrade stuff, but some of them. But the key one is this IETF being slow to standardize. So next slide, please. So the idea is to fundamentally change how we manage Yang models in the IETF. And the idea is to stop publishing them in RFCs and instead start putting Yang models in GitHub and version the Yang models themselves in GitHub as standard code assets. And so that raises lots of interesting questions. And this is not a trivial, easy change to make, because the IETF process is all about publishing RFC documents and things. But these aren't documents, these are code assets, and we should be treating them as such. So the idea, therefore, is we still need some RFCs to sort of support the Yang models that provide the sort of descriptive text you get today that describe the model behavior and things like that. So that's all useful, that's all great. That stuff shouldn't necessarily have to change at all if you're putting in a minor bug fix. And the example that came up recently in the Netmod one is the fact that the IP address type that we use, either the definition of that address type is wrong, or we've got 50 RFCs that are using it wrong, and we need to fix those. And I look at publishing or republishing 50 RFCs and go, I don't want to do that, because the amount of work for it to go through the ISG makes that not like a pleasant idea. So this is the idea, is to try and do this and hopefully try and involve these a bit more. I think the next slide has a few more details, and this isn't a massively thought out, I don't have all the answers, and really what the picture here is to get a feel of the room is, yes, should we be heading in this direction, and is there somebody who's willing to help write some drafts here, experimental drafts, to actually test the waters and get people to review this and comment on it. And there'll be a lot of feedback, and there'll be pushback in various places and things, but we've got an opportunity to try and do this and make it better. Some ideas here is you effectively have some level of stable branches, and you can put in bug fixes and things, and you'd have some level of reviews for minor changes that happen within the working group, and you just keep them there like a working group last call and say, look, this looks good, this is done. And then every maybe few years, you might then, if it's very stable, publish an updated version, say we're good. Or if you're making major version changes, then you'd have to go through like a full IETF last call review. So it's trying to get a balance between stuff that a smaller group of people can agree that these are right, versus ones that actually really need and benefit from a wider IETF review. So that's my quick pitch and comment. That's reasonably positive.
So Rob, a clarifying question. So
Yes.
you're by continuing this, are you thinking heading towards an experiment and running a process experiment?
I think, yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think that's what would be helpful is I would like somebody to help write an experimental process experiment RFC to say we want to try and do this. Because I think we need to write down what it is, how it's going to work, what the rules are and things, and then try it and test it and see and refine it and be able to take that out. And I think we would have the support. I'll have to check with the ISG of running an experiment to say we're going to do this. And maybe that's a good way of testing the water without upsetting too many people straight away.
How fast do you think you can do this?
If if I can get some help writing some of the text, I think it goes reasonably fast. If you're stuck with me writing the document, given how quickly I've progressed the two Yang models with me and my workload, that's the tricky thing. But I think this really matters. So this is important, and we have to do this.
So I chair a different group, and in that group, we have a really small document change. And me as co-chair want to move faster than the authors, which is weird. But I would love to tie together that draft and that module with this process and get those authors to help you out. And let's run it fast. I mean, it's like adding two identities to a module. This should be a no-brainer. It should take 10 minutes, but we're going to take 10 months instead.
So if there's somebody, is anyone here in the room?
They're not in the room. They presented the last time, but we can get them.
Okay. Benoit.
By the way, it's Italo. We talked about this at the last meeting.
Benoit Claes, actually, I support the idea. And how fast could it be? The Yang catalog was done actually with that exact idea in mind. That if the IETF was not fast enough, we would just forget about that. There is a blog there with a paper from 2015 which says disrupt the IETF process. So if we just post the Yang module in the catalog and they arrive by default there, what do we need? Kind of thumbs up. This is the version that people are using or not. And the process is actually easy. We've got everything in place to do that.
So I just heard a co-author volunteering. Thank you, Benoit.
Did I miss that?
Kent as chair. One person did not raise their hand, or rather they raised their hand saying that they would not like to see this work proceed. I'm just wondering if that individual would be willing to speak as to why they did not raise their hand.
You might have to unlock the queue. I'll do that.
Well, I guess I didn't feel that strongly.
So thanks for those two lightning talks. And we are now at the end of our session. Appreciate all the really good contribution in the room, online, and on the list. And look forward to seeing you in all those places, but hopefully in person at the next meeting. Thank you all.
Yeah.